Recently, I had an experience with credit card fraud that caused so much unnecessary stress and anxiety. I spent hours on the phone and in chats with my credit card company. I had to get two different cards before the fraud stopped, and I was so worried about what was going to happen to my money in my bank account. And I sometimes have the fear that it's going to happen again, right? And that's why I'm so excited to introduce You Are the Healer's newest sponsor, Aura, an app for protecting online data and personal information. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access things like my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Protecting yourself and your personal information is a form of self-care. I swear. Go to my sponsor, aura.com/healer to get a 14-day free trial and have peace of mind knowing your information is safe. Again, that's Aura, AURA.com/healer for your 2-week free trial. You Are the Healer is sponsored by BetterHelp. Therapy is mandatory because there's absolutely nothing wrong with seeking help. I think every person who walks this earth needs therapy, honestly. I'm stoked to be connected with BetterHelp to offer affordable and accessible therapy resources. The link is in my show notes, and you can also go to betterhelp.com/healer. That's better, HELP.com/healer. Now let's get into this episode. Hi, besties. Before we dive into the episode, I just want to provide a quick disclaimer. You Are the Healer is here for empowerment, storytelling, and those aha moments, but it is not a substitute for therapy, medical advice, or professional help. I'm sharing my experiences, education, and opinions to support you, not to diagnose you. Everything you hear on the show is for informational and educational purposes only. You are responsible for your own choices, healing journey, and how you apply what resonates. If you need deeper support, please reach out to a qualified professional that can support you on your healing journey. All right, disclaimers done. Let's dive into this episode. In this episode of You Are the Healer, we have a special guest, Benny Rubin. Benny shares his journey of emotional growth and maturity and healing through the loss of his father. So, trigger warning, this episode does mention death and grief. We talk about healing through music, complicated versus simple grief, and the therapeutic power of creative expression in whatever form that takes. This conversation also touches on the role of music in healing and the value of maintaining your physical health in order to maintain your mental health. So let's get into this episode. This is our season of The Borrowed Mind, where we have all guest episodes this season. And this episode, I'm excited to introduce Benny, who's working on a musical project called Muted Circus. And we're just going to get into it. So, Benny, thanks for being on You Are the Healer.
Hey, my pleasure.
All right. So, a lot of the people, you might be totally new to them. So kind of tell me a little bit about yourself and your
Sure.
journey with your mental health.
Sure. That's an interesting question. Journey with mental health. It's funny. It's like I'm a happy kid originally. I don't have too many memories from childhood in like kind of a funny way because I've always really been now oriented. And it seems like kind of a weird brag in a way to be like, I'm so now oriented that I don't have very many memories. But if you don't really spend any time thinking and like ruminating on your day, and you don't really internalize the small slights of like every day, then you kind of end up like missing a lot of memory in a way, in like kind of a strange way. So my story is that it wasn't until my 30s when I really feel like I matured emotionally. And it happened under bad circumstances. My father was diagnosed with terminal cancer very suddenly. And as with a lot of people whose parents suddenly get ill, especially ones that get a terminal diagnosis, it has this effect of making you think about your own relationship to yourself, your own relationship to your parents, your own relationship to your childhood in a very rapid way.
Yeah.
And I'd always been a music guy. From when I was a kid, I played music and I went to music school and I got my degree in music. But for a solid 10, 15 years, I didn't do anything but listen. I didn't play an instrument. I didn't do anything. I mean, play my instruments, I should say, because I play a bunch of instruments. But when I was sort of hit with this wave of emotion, I knew that I just needed to experience it through music. So I took this sort of energy and all these new feelings and sort of new sadnesses and new sort of sudden, rapid thinking about childhood and started to write songs and bring together musical pieces that I felt communicated that in some way. And then after making and recording and spending a lot of time alone, I decided to bring them together into recordings. And to date, I've released 45 songs under the Muted Circus name. All of them are based around me trying to heal through the process of grieving. And some of it I really like, some of it I don't like so much. Half of them are instrumental and half of them I sing on. And that's sort of like a very funny way of saying that when I finished all of the morning process and the writing and recording of all these songs, which I still have one that I haven't released yet, which is kind of funny. I've been sitting on it for years. I kind of went back to just being like my normal happy self, but now there's a little bit more awareness, a little bit more depth, a little bit more maturity, maybe a lot more. I don't know. You can ask my wife. A lot more than I had before. So it really feels like I was given music as a gift as a child because I didn't have to think too much about it. I was given the opportunity to play violin and electric bass. And went to music school and I had all that training. And when I needed it most, music was there in a certain sense.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think it's really like music and any type of creative expression can really help us when we're in the thick of something super, super painful. And it's more so like the creating of anything itself is the healing process. It doesn't really matter what the outcome is. It's like putting that
100%.
experience into something just so that you can get it out and to express it is so therapeutic.
Yeah. And externalizing any sort of internal state can oftentimes have the effect of it's almost like instant perspective. Because in some ways, songs themselves, most songs, unless you're talking about something very, very experimental in some way, most songs are really similar elements to other songs. And you're not really going to invent an entirely new thing to help you heal through something. You don't have to say, I'm going to be as innovative as Picasso to overcome the sickness of my mother or like the frustrations of having with work or something. It doesn't really make that much sense. It almost makes sense to go back to something far more basic. And so the question is like, what are you doing with your time while processing it? And it seems to me that the more active the activity is, the more healing potential it has, rather than something very passive like simply listening to music or watching movies that can sort of make you forget the pain you have at the moment, but it doesn't sort of help you confront the pain in such a way that actually helps you process it and metabolize it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. It's almost like the more immersive the outlet is, the more you get out of it. So it's not just, like you said, distracting. It's like kind of learning the lesson and processing and coming to terms with things too, because it's so like hands-on.
Yeah. And I think that we're humans and we like to label things and we like to and not in a bad way. There's like obviously negative sides of labeling, but even the simple act, if you weren't such a musical person, of taking a notebook and writing at the top of it something relevant to the thing you're going through and then
Mhm.
doodling
Mhm.
is in your sort of brainscape, you're assigning this piece of paper something external
Mhm.
and you're working on the piece of paper, which has this odd effect of working on your mental state around it. So
Mhm.
it could be something like, and these are obviously good prompts for almost anything, where you're sort of like, the day my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And if you wrote that on a
Mm.
piece of paper and then you started to write words around it, and then maybe if you were artistic, draw around it. And if you had colors, you could add color to it. And you're sort of spending time ruminating. Well, not ruminating, it doesn't ruminate. You're like actively involved in this process of thinking about that really dark time, but
Mhm.
also you're working on it. Are you working on a way that probably you'll just close your notebook and put away? Yeah. But you're sort of working on it in like a external way. And somehow that actually seems to be a really healthy way to confront issues.
Mhm.
Obviously, I'm not a mental health expert, so it's
Mhm.
possible that there would be some sort of unforeseen downside. But in my case, what I did was I needed lots of time alone because I had to try to confront the pain and confusion, especially in that year and a half period where my dad was perfectly healthy but dying, which is a very odd thing that I'm sure some
Mhm.
of your listeners have experienced before. But silence with an instrument, that seemed to be the equivalent of like a blank piece of paper that was labeled.
Mm.
So it's like, okay, I want to understand what about my childhood was happy, like what made it happy.
Mhm.
I'm going to try to recall memories from my childhood that made me right. So I end up with
Mhm.
songs, some of which they're about me because obviously that makes sense. But there's like the father, my dad is in like the other room, for
Mm.
example. So it's like, what does that feel like to be near someone that supports you in that way?
Yeah.
And of course, in the death experience, you learn what it means to only have that person in spirit.
So what was it like for you kind of going down memory lane
Mm.
and steering into the grief and the processing of, your dad's situation? What was it like as you were starting to record and give yourself the time to kind of let this out?
I feel like a lot of it in my case has to do with actually setting aside the time. It's sort of a nice idea that your grieving time and mourning time will really fit within your existing schedule.
Yeah,
And
it's never how it
I mean you're
works, I feel
you're
like.
laughing, but it doesn't always work like that. But I did understand on a basic level. I think it was probably my brother or someone like that who said, "Hey, you need to set aside time for grieving and mourning. You just have to. You have to
Mhm.
set aside time to do it.
Mhm.
Um, you can't expect it to happen, and at your convenience in a way." So I
Mhm.
was very deliberate around setting aside time. I set aside time on Thursday morning and on Sunday morning. And I even went so far as to renting a small rehearsal space just in the mornings from another band.
Mhm.
And I went there. So I would like
Mm.
physically go. And I'd be like,
Yeah.
bye, wife. I'll be back later. And I would go there. And I wouldn't
Mhm.
really necessarily have an intention of what I was going to do there, but I knew that that was a time for me to be alone with my thoughts, alone with my
Mhm.
sadness, alone with the guitar or whatever I was bringing. And I think that helped a lot because it
Mhm.
meant that in everyday life, when sort of overwhelming sadness would creep in, I could accept it as it is. And then also sort of, well, on Thursday,
Mhm.
I'm going to dive deeper into that,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't trying to suppress it in the other times, but
Mhm.
sort of you have a little bit of like time for it.
Mhm.
And which is obviously very fortunate to be able to set aside time like that. I was very overwhelmed and very confused and very physically unready
Mhm.
for the kind of sadness that comes with that amount of mourning and loss in a very
Yeah.
sudden way, which
Mhm.
I think a lot of people are very ill prepared for.
Yeah.
And I've been a lifelong non-drinker and I've never done drugs. That's just not my thing. So you sort of are facing it in a very like a raw way.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I think in some ways that's probably a healthier way to handle. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe
No
harder
judgments.
harder in the moment, but long term, probably a little bit better when you don't have anything to, like, numb out or distract you from the feeling.
Well, we all have things to distract us and numb us out, even if it's not contraband or something. There's a million things that
Yeah.
that you can do. But it's funny. It's like when when your life is really thrown for a loop.
Mhm.
I think there's a certain personality type that I maybe have, which is you want to assert some sort of control.
Mm.
And there's another personality type that I have, maybe others have it too, where you actually really earnestly want to come out the other side better in some way.
Mhm.
An example of this would be like this is kind of a silly example. It doesn't really apply to me, but I had a friend who finally got a really, really hard job.
Mm.
His job was going to be really hard and he knew it.
Mhm.
So as opposed to sort of dreading the hardness of it,
Mhm.
he basically was like, look, I'm going to have to work 12 hours a day at this
Mhm.
job. And I'm going to need to sign up for a gym that's near my new office to make sure that I'm not neglecting my body. And
Mhm.
I'm going to change my lifestyle in all these ways to accommodate for this rough time.
Mhm.
And whether I only last 6 months, a year, or whether I manage to tame the job and get it down to a normal number of hours, I'm accepting that it's going to be very difficult. And I'm going to adjust my life to make sure that I don't end up unhealthy, overly stressed from it.
Mhm.
Someone might also do the same if they were going to do a master's degree and
Mhm.
hadn't been in school for a long time and it was going to be a long commute to school or something like that. So you
Mhm.
sort of stack other healthy things around the hard thing that's happening,
Mhm.
and that can help you get through. Totally a coping mechanism, but it sort of helps you get through. And I think maybe in some ways that's what I did. I said, okay, I'm going to pour this into music. I'm going
Mhm.
to make records and I'm going to make them great,
Mhm.
in my own way. And I'm going to orchestrate them and I'm going to play strings on them and I'm going to
Mhm.
get them mixed and mastered from professionals and I'm going to release them. And like, that's how I'm going to get through this.
Mhm.
I think that all that kind of stuff is just trying to harness a new form of energy, however negative,
Mhm.
and use it in some way.
Yeah, I think of it like alchemy, like you're taking this one substance or this energy, like you said, and like you're changing its form into something different. So like yes, the energy you were creating from was really painful and intense, and like grief is like all consuming. You know, I like the words that you
Yeah,
used of like it's of a magnitude that sometimes no one's prepared for, and you're
sure.
taking that intense level of energy and you're changing its form into something that not only is helping you express and process, but it's also something where when other people listen and if they've had that experience too, they can tell through the music and it like unifies people in a really beautiful way.
It can, for sure. I think that the messages always get distorted and confused and lost even in between our brain thinking it and our mouth saying it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the connection, the external connection element oftentimes tends to be where it's a mistake to focus on.
Mm.
For example, there's song I highly doubt that any one of your listeners is going to listen to all 45 songs, which is
You never
fine.
know.
Well, yeah. I think that there are some songs in there where it's I can hear my own pain, but I don't really I think like, wow, this is not great. I know exactly why I made this. I know exactly
Mm-hmm.
what I was thinking when I made it. I understand what was going through my head, but I don't think like this is it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, what's more important really? Probably the making of it's more important. Probably the
Mm-hmm.
processing of the feeling is more important
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
certain sense
Totally.
than how someone might receive it or someone care about it
Mm-hmm.
in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
So I think it's easy to get caught up in this idea that, oh, I'm gonna whatever the creative outlet is, oh, I'm gonna use this sadness to write a book and I'm gonna become a best-selling author from it. It's like, well, that's not
Mm-hmm.
really that's actually focusing on the wrong things. It's sort of
Right.
almost better to write something that encapsulates your own feelings so much. And maybe, just maybe, if you have a sibling or a brother or sister, you'd share it with them and then it would resonate with them and not
Mm-hmm.
even worry so much about like the whole world hearing it or caring about it or even putting it in a place where they could interact with it.
Yeah, that's so true. It's like this level of remaining completely unattached to the outcome or how it looks to other people and focusing more on like, this is for me and to help me. And if by chance that somebody else benefits, like that's great, but that's not the point of why I'm doing this.
Yeah. I think it also marketing fundamentally is a very in this modern age it's a very funny thing because
Hmm.
for example, Sydney, you put a lot of heart into all your episodes and I'm sure you put a lot of thought into everything and you try
Hmm.
really hard. And in the moment, if during this interview you were desperately trying to make clippable things, it would be really awkward for everyone. But
Uh-huh.
after the fact, when you're listening through it, if you find
Hmm.
something clippable and marketable, you can sort
Hmm.
of shift your brain to being like, actually, this kind of slaps. Like I could use this to get a little bit more attention for my show. But I think
Uh-huh.
in it's sort of like you have to identify what the moment of creation is and like what your brain is telling you and what your taste is telling you
Hmm.
as you create the thing, what
Hmm.
feels the most comfortable and right.
Hmm.
And if you think too much in terms of the receiving side of it, you actually trip yourself up very, very easily. You can
Hmm.
start to end up in like this weird headspace where you're judging your own output as
Hmm.
if a listener is judging it without
Hmm.
you even knowing why you feel like you should be making it or what inside you is saying, yes, this is the melody or this is the thing, you know?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot of times people, especially in like social media age, they get tripped up on like, what are other people going to perceive this as? When all of that is really like a self-judgment that you're pushing outside to other people, but it's really like you judging yourself and like you judging how you feel about what you do, but you're thinking it's like, oh, it's other people. So it's an interesting thing that our
It is.
brains do.
It is a really, really wild information space because the funny thing is the flip side of it. Oftentimes, when you listen to things or whatever, you think, "Wow, this like really isn't good." I understand why no one listens to this or no one likes it. Like someone else's something.
Mhm.
And occasionally, if you have any sense of craft, you can sort of see this really isn't finished.
Mhm.
You know, this isn't very good in a
Mhm.
way. And so it's a tricky thing to balance being usefully critical of things that you hear and see and listen to.
Mhm.
Like you may be listening to someone else whose podcast is sort of on a similar theme and be like, ooh, this isn't good.
Mhm.
But at the same time, because being critical of other folks' work is actually a very effective way for you to craft your own work identity. But being able to suppress that same criticism for yourself or
Mhm.
delay the criticism for yourself.
Mhm.
That's the other thing that I see a lot of creative folks get tripped up on that I didn't have to worry about because I spent so much time alone with it was you say, oh yeah, there are problems with this, but I'm not going to judge this until much later in the process. You just say, now's not the time to judge this.
Right. Yeah, because that criticism, if you're doing it in the moment, can like prevent you from creating at all.
Exactly. Exactly. So then you start to say, like, imagine the example we talked about before, you write on the top of a piece of paper, the day my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And then you draw a line, you go, yeah, no, a line there. No, rip it out. Throw a new piece of paper the day my dad, right? You're sort of like, I think you sort of missed the point. Or, well, I'll live stream this. It's like, really? Like, you're already jumping straight to showing it to people, even though you don't know how it's going to feel for you or like why you're doing it. You know what I mean? Like there seems to be like that the mediated leap where what we're really trying to do is have what you might call an unmediated, I mean, it is a media because it's like paper or music, but it's an unmediated relationship with the emotion you're feeling.
Yeah, it's like unwitnessed. It's like just you and
that's an interesting
experience.
Way to put it.
Yeah. So was there any part of you when you were going through this grief that wanted to just like completely avoid it and like run away and not set aside the intentional time that you did?
That's such a good question. I think I kind of avoided emotions at all for basically my whole life.
Oh, wow.
And normally you'd say like, oh, that's terrible. Like that's awful. But because I was sort of happy and I didn't really carry grudges and I had a happy childhood and like a very loving family, I didn't have sort of like latent trauma that I was ignoring. I just had no reason to wallow in anything. I just like I wouldn't even think back on a conversation and think, oh man, I was kind of a dick in that conversation. Maybe I should apologize to that person. It didn't even occur to me.
Yeah.
Other people would tell me things like that occasionally, like, hey, when you met that person, you said this, but that wasn't cool. And I'm like, oh, damn, you're right. But I would never really put that kind of thinking on myself.
Yeah.
I just hadn't spent enough time thinking about and processing emotions. You could say I was avoiding them, but I also just wasn't really feeling them. So the process of spending a whole year or two, spending a lot of time alone, really thinking about it, really processing, as I did definitely became way more emotionally mature and thought a lot more about emotions and thought about more about how I relate to other people and what they may or may not feel. And I think that ultimately when you have awareness, then you can have a little bit more intention.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like this experience really like opened your eyes to a lot of different things.
I was on a podcast a few months back and it was with a therapist. And she said something like, there's pure grief, and most people don't get to experience pure grief because the loved one that died, they had a complicated relationship with them. So they not only have to sort through the complexity of their emotions, but they also then have to grieve, and that complicates grief. And I think in my case, I was able to experience what I would consider very pure grief because I had a very pure relationship with my dad. So the experience of pure grief is probably very different from more complicated grieving situations. And I think that in the case of my own father, the sort of process of the diagnosis, the protracted dying period, then the death itself forms its own kind of multi-layered traumatic timescape in a certain way. Like you could imagine a scenario where you have a very pure, loving relationship with someone and they die very suddenly. Well, you have the shock of their death and then you have the grief and mourning. But this like multi-staged terminal diagnosis, protracted dying period, then the dying, then the mourning. And then in my case, my father actually died in my arms.
Oh, wow.
With the family around him. So in some ways, that's a very ideal death. But in other ways, that produces a sort of another layer of, well, literally someone you love is leaving you right in front of you,
Yeah.
So
wow.
I think that in some ways, the maturation just comes from facing all these new experiences that are really going in slow motion in a way, because you have a lot of time to be like, I have a father who is dying. You have like almost a year and a half of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, I think that in many ways, the small changes that happen would be reading a very, very long novel, like reading, War and Peace or something. And it takes so many hours to read it that by the time you finish it, you're like, I am changed in a very small way, but I'm definitely different from when I started reading this epic tome.
Yeah.
And so I think that in music school is very similar. You practice super intensely, you face music in all these different ways for years and years in a very intense environment. I went and I studied in Japan And so for a year or so, it was like 10 hours a day of Japanese. It changes you for sure.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the changes happen when you undergo anything that takes hours and hours and hours or months and months and months of like very intense time. So I think there's that natural sort of change that happens, which is when you go through a thing that is protracted, takes years to do. And then I think there's all the normal ways where you lose your father, therefore you mature somewhat into the place of your father. You don't have your father to rely on, so you start to internalize more. Well, what are the things that my father would or would not have said or would have not have felt in this kind of scenario? So I think there's sort of a natural thing. And then you mature through the process of supporting your own family through it.
Yeah.
You know, my mother and father were married for 45 years or something. So it's very hard for my mom, very hard for my brother and sister. So then you support each other, and then hopefully your relationship grows.
Yeah.
Through
Is
that.
that what you found in your experience, that you ended up a lot closer to your other family members?
Yes, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure, in many ways. And then
Yeah.
in some ways, and I think other folks that are listening to this will feel the same way, sometimes the dead relative is the bridge to other parts of the family. So if you don't really actively pursue maintaining the relationships or building the relationships or essentially building a new bridge, you can actually weaken lots of ties in your family.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. It certainly exposes a lot of like the underpinnings of a family or a culture.
Yeah.
That you have to like, oh, wow. So normally I would only contact that person once a year, but I could rely on them being there for this kind of holiday. But now that's not going to happen anymore. So if I want to be in touch with them, I really need to reach out directly, or I need to
Yeah.
find another bridge to that person. If that makes sense. So there
Yeah.
was a lot more of that for sure.
Yeah, it's like without that person to unify you, you have to put in a little extra effort and intentionality to maintain the
Or a
relationship.
lot of extra effort. Sometimes you have to build entirely new structures. And sometimes that person was connecting you to people that you just don't want to be in touch with.
Yeah.
So you're kind of, in that way, you're kind of thankful, like, oof, glad I don't have to deal with that anymore.
So what would you say to someone who's listening that maybe is in the struggle of, or like the full experience of grief now? Like what helped you and what do you think might help somebody else?
I think that because grief is one of the most natural things in the world, and certain kinds of grief for sure, but grief in general is one of the most natural things in the world. I'm not exactly sure how you measure it, but there's sort of like a certain amount of pain that you're going to have to feel before you feel better. And what I found was that most efforts to avoid feeling the pain just delayed the feeling of the pain. And like a small example would be, I would wake up in the middle of the night. And as with many people in that sort of moment after you wake up, it's sort of like you have no identity, you have no time and place. You're just a sort of this disembodied, egoless thing for a fraction of a second. And normally, if you're in sort of a good spirit and you don't have anxiety problems, you sort of ease into being yourself and you're like, oh, here I am awake. It's probably somewhere between 3 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. Man, I hope I can go back to sleep. But when you're in the depths of grief or going through some serious stuff, the grief comes very quickly and fills your head. Just like if you have an anxiety issue, the anxiety comes. It like jumps on you. So in the case of grief, what I felt was I had to actually tell myself in the middle of the night, I'd have to remind myself, hey, feel the pain. Feel it. Doesn't feel good. It's not something you want to feel. And it might depress you and might pull you really deep into yourself. And you might be worried that you won't feel better again, but you sort of have to feel it. And there are all sorts of tricks people do to try to push it to the side and push it out of the way. But I found personally that actually just letting myself feel it was the most effective way. You feel the grief, you really feel it in your body. You let yourself feel it. You sort of track where it sits in your body. And in some ways, when you really lock into that grief, your body actually just lets you go back to sleep. You might feel the same way in the morning.
It's kind of like you have to surrender to the experience. And like, I think of grief, like everyone says it like, oh, it comes in waves. So a lot of times when I'm experiencing grief or navigating it, I think of like, you almost have to surrender to it and like just ride it out, let the sadness, come into your body, feel it where it is. Because like you said, it's not going to go away or get better if you don't allow it to be felt. It's just going to keep showing up and it might get more and more and more intense.
I think it also changes structures and forms in ways that you can't predict. It's sort of like the most benign form is just sadness in your body. That's sort of like totally natural. It's non-violent, it's not aggressive, it's not external, it's not pushing it on anywhere else and anything else. But then if you don't feel it properly in that way, it might manifest itself in other ways that are either less desirable or just downright like not good. And I think if you really have trouble processing it, that's why there are professionals. That's why there are things like therapists and different kinds of therapies, or even art therapy if you want to, if you feel like you want to be guided by a professional, like that's totally legit too, to seek that kind of thing out, you know?
I want to talk a little bit more about music too.
What kind of music do you like, or do you like lots of different
I
kinds?
listen to literally everything.
People always say that, but they don't really.
My favorite, like growing up, like as a 5-year-old, I was obsessed with Green Day. I would like
Okay.
cry if we couldn't listen to the American Idiot album in the car. I was like so into it. So actually on Sunday, I saw All Time Low at Red Rocks. They're like my favorite band ever. And they actually just had to end their set early because the lead singer had an infection of his vocal cords. And I was like purely devastated because the show had to end early.
Oh.
Yeah.
Would you say that his vocal cords were at an all-time low?
Wow, that was great. I know it sounds silly, but when you were talking about like you wake up in the middle of the night, like the grief will come in. That next morning, when I woke up, like before I could even have a conscious thought, I just was hit with this wave of like devastation. Like, damn, like the show didn't get finished. And I'm like, I know that that's a silly comparison, but that's what like I just had that experience this week. So
Well, it shows you had like a lots of anticipation. You were excited about it, the show, and
yeah.
then I mean, like that does sound silly, but in a certain way, our brains are really good at anticipating things and building tons and tons of track that we're sort of like supposed to go down or could go down. And anything that disrupts that track, you feel something, like no matter what it
Yeah.
is. Even just like, oh, I was going to have lunch with my friend, but then my friend said they'd rather have lunch another day. Your brain is sort of like, well, I laid all this like preparatory track to have lunch with your friend
Right?
today. And now that
Yeah.
that's not happening, so I need to sort of like reorchestrate it. And when you lose someone you love, like you just have decades and decades of this sort of invisible track laid that your brain is constantly pulled towards. And every time that pocket of your brain gets hit, it goes, yeah, but yeah, sorry, not going to happen. You know what I mean? And so it's
Yeah.
like, it is in a certain sense, it's like a super duper exaggerated version of a really cool thing that you were planning not happening
Right.
properly. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think of you expect your life to go a certain way. You have like that track in your mind and it has certain people in it or certain plans. And anytime that
Yeah.
that changes, it can be really hard to navigate. I know I went through a really hard breakup a couple of years ago, and the worst part
Ooh.
about it was grieving the like loss of the future that I thought I was going to
Yep.
live with this person. And that was the
Yep.
most like intense
That's
part
very
of the whole
real.
thing. Yeah.
That's very, very real. I think that it's easy to diminish things like that, with just
Mhm.
like, oh, it's just to this, or oh, it's just to that. I even think that the people don't properly mourn the loss of physical objects that they lose,
Mhm.
whatever it would be. Like, oh, I really love that, and it got ruined. That sweater, I
Mhm.
really love that sweater, and it got totally ruined. It got
Mhm.
shrunk in the wash, and like I'm not going to wear it anymore. I feel
Mhm.
like it's easy to dismiss any sort of little thing like that, but
Mhm.
in the moment, it's really important to sort of lay new track very quickly in a certain
Mhm.
sense
Yeah.
with things that are replaceable. Obviously,
Mhm.
parents or relationships are not replaceable, so you have to give it due time to
Mhm.
sort of really mourn it.
Yeah.
I think that I breakups are really fascinating because they have lots of anticipation.
Mhm.
In relationships are really just like packed full of anticipation. That's sort of like what defines a relationship with another person.
Mhm.
The truth is that being with that person and nothing you imagine coming to pass is fine, because your brain is always ready to create new things to anticipate and new things to sort of
Mhm.
project into the future in a way. And that's
Yeah.
sort of why when a parent dies very, very old, it
Mhm.
probably hurts a lot less than if a parent dies younger. And
Mhm.
obviously that pain is amplified a thousandfold if someone loses a child where their
Mhm.
entire existence is entirely future oriented in a way.
Right. Okay, well, I kind of want to start with our checkout questions. This has been a very interesting
All
conversation. I've
right.
been loving it. Yeah. So, these are questions that I ask everyone. as we wrap up our episodes. They're kind of like, I don't want to say rapid fire because if you want to do a couple sentences, that's fine. There's no like time limit. But okay, first question is, what is something that people often get wrong about you?
I don't think people get too much wrong about me. That's a good question. I think that I have like, for a while, I've had like kind of curly wild hair.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that it's kind of funny. It's like I went to music school. I care a lot about music. Pretty much my whole life, people have been asking me about weed, but I've actually never smoked weed in my entire life. It's like really funny. I remember when I was like 19, which is a long time ago, some guy just said to me straight out, like, I bet you smoke a lot of weed. And I was just like, no, but that's cool. Like, whatever you think. But it's just like funny. I think it's because I look like a lot of famous potheads somehow.
Yeah, I could see that.
And I'm
I
also
can see
from
that.
Southern California. So maybe there's a little bit of like a slightly, I don't know,
Like a laid back
relaxed.
vibe. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I'm curious. I'm curious. You've never drank or used any substances in your entire life.
No, I've never drank my whole life.
Is there a motivation behind that? Like, or just not interested? Like, what's that about?
Well, without sort of, I wonder if I spent like a year in therapy or something, like I would like uncover some like magical thing.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people that don't mess with drugs, alcohol at all have like control issues of some sort, like they want to stay in control or something.
Mm-hmm.
In my case, partially because I was just kind of like a happy go lucky person,
Mm-hmm.
I never really had the desire to alter my state.
Mm, yeah.
And then that was layered with in high school. I grew up in Southern California. So as soon as I was 16, I drove everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much.
Yeah.
And all my friends were really into straight edge hardcore, straight edge meaning people who don't do drugs and alcohol, which is also kind of interesting because a lot of straight edge culture is wrapped up with Christian culture. And I'm like a Jew.
Yeah.
So like, it didn't like me. That wasn't
Yeah.
it. But there was something about just like, no, we have a lot of fun, but we do it clean. Resonated with me between like the
Yeah.
ages of 15 and 18. And then when I went to college, I went to the Berklee College of Music in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
I was really focused on like practicing. And
Mm,
it didn't make any sense to me that I would do things that would make it harder for me to practice my instrument,
yeah.
play well in like an ensemble or whatever. And then by
Mm-hmm.
that time I was really locked into just I decided to just make it really part of my personality in a way. Like I attached it to my own sense of self. It's just like, no, that's not something I do.
Yeah.
So then even when I moved to Japan, I lived there for 7 years. Like even though it was a really serious drinking culture, I just was like, nah.
Yeah.
And then now
Yeah.
that I'm 40, it's like it doesn't seem to make any sense.
Right. Yeah. But I think that's really cool. I mean, I'm sober myself, and so it's always nice to talk to people about like why they choose it and the fact that it's always been a part of who you are is I think it's really cool. Pretty unique.
I think that there's a couple like little tricks that you should keep in your heart,
Mhm.
which is one, even if you do not like the taste of something like non-alcoholic beer,
Mhm.
it's a pretty smooth move these days. If you
Mhm.
do like let me put it this way. I think that asserting non-drinkingness on other people is uncomfortable
Yeah.
and not necessary.
Mhm.
Some people like to be like, "Oh, I'm not drinking," or like they make it a thing. Some people make it a thing. That's fine. I'm not here to judge
Yeah.
them. But
Mhm.
on the same side, being like a lifelong non-drinker is a very different thing than just like, "Oh, I just choose not to drink today."
Mhm.
Then the other side of it is now with all these non-alcoholic beer options, you can sort of drink a beer without drinking the alcohol.
Mhm.
And so you can get a little bit of the fun and not make people feel uncomfortable, like, oh, I'll just have water or something like that, you know?
Right.
So that's kind
Yeah.
of nice. But I was going to say that in a pinch, in foreign countries, in certain scenarios, the smooth move is to tell people that you're allergic. Like if
Yeah.
you're like, I'll give you an example. Like let's imagine we're in like some foreign country
Mhm.
and the waiter just takes a liking to you and your friend or something
Mhm.
and they like bring you a glass of wine and they like making a big deal about it, like for free or something. And you're just like,
Mhm.
oh, damn. In that scenario, in order to refuse it, you may have to be like, actually, I'm really allergic, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good tip.
Sometimes you have to do a little bit of white lying,
Mhm.
just a little bit
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
yourself out of the pinch.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I love that tangent. Okay, what is something that you wish you could tell your younger self?
Wow, that's a trick question. I actually, if I found my younger self somewhere, I'd probably be really annoyed by them and think like, damn, this guy needs to like shut up, like chill out. So I probably would tell my younger self something to try to hasten my emotional maturity.
Mm, yeah,
I think I would probably, well, we all know that the true thing that we would tell our younger self, we all know what the real thing we would tell our younger selves is, which
which
we would
is
say, buy Bitcoin. But other than the buy Bitcoin thing, which we would all tell our younger selves, honestly, if I did meet my younger self, I'd be like, hey, get over yourself. In the future, you're going to hear about a thing called Bitcoin. Get in on that.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Okay, if you could make a law that everyone has to follow, what would it be and why?
Oh, this is too hard a question.
It can be silly. It doesn't have to be so serious.
I sort of feel like reasonable public comment should be taken into account more often on very, very small matters. Like for
what?
example, jury duty, you get called to be on a jury, and most things get settled before they get to a jury trial. We have a lot of legal things going on all over society that really you don't need a jury for. But I almost feel like jury duty should be way more frequent and way more intense, and maybe even electronic, where you get an email that's like, the court has asked for your opinion on this matter. And you read the thing and then you like weigh in. It'll be, it's something like company A owed this person da 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 da, and then they didn't pay it because this da 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 da. Here's a packet of evidence, and here's the settlement that's proposed. Do you think this is reasonable, unreasonable? I think there should just be like more public comment on like much smaller things, and we should be leveraging randomized public for just way more. And I'm not saying that judges or whatever need to take the public's opinion into everything, but I somehow think that more randomized, more public weighing in on things, even if they're non-experts, matters a lot. Because I'm not a lawyer, so I'm sure some lawyer will be like, "That's dumb for these reasons." In our justice system, where you have a jury, juries have incredible power. They have incredible power. A jury can say, we believe that they're guilty, but we're going to decide that they're innocent. And that overrides everything else. That's wild. So the fact that we have a jury system, but we don't ask citizenry to participate in more decisions, even small ones that get decided away from it, I think is kind of a shame. I think we should double down on systems like juries.
Yeah.
I don't know how that would manifest in law. And if you're a law professor and you're listening and you think it's dumb, send me a note. Or maybe some country has that and it's a huge disaster and I don't even know about it. Yeah. Maybe they're all in my spam folder and I never saw them.
All right. Best mental health advice you have to give or that you've received?
I think that's a really good question. I think that the best mental health advice is to make everything you can that's not your mind as healthy as possible. That's my best mental health advice.
Yeah. And what do you mean when you say that?
I mean, we're all guilty of not following this. So this isn't really like someone's going to look at the video and be like, this skinny dude with wild hair is giving health advice. I don't think so. But what I mean is those silly memes where someone's like, oh, I feel like crap. Why? And then it's like, did you drink water today? No. Did you, and you go through this list of like, did you eat any vegetables today? No. Did you eat fruit today? No. Did you go outside today? No. It's like that kind of thing. I think that if you just flip the whole thing in your head and you go like, these are the 10 things that sort of make sense for physical health, and you optimize for those things, I think in many ways the mental health just sort of gets optimized.
Well, I was going to say you're creating like a healthy environment for your brain, right? So if you're sleeping good, if you're exercising, you're going outside. Yeah, it's like your brain has its best chance to do well.
Yeah, and I agree. And also I think that oftentimes that can expose the one serious mental issue. So I have like many friends that suffer from like pretty serious anxiety. And lo and behold, the anxiety sort of latches itself onto other things. It becomes a problem. But if they're optimizing sleep and hydration and, healthy eating and exercise, then it really puts into sharp focus the anxiety and helps them understand it, manage it better, and even maybe get it treated better because it doesn't seem to pull on other things. And I think the reason why depression can be so tricky is that it can reduce motivation to do the things that would better yourself. So I'm not saying that this is some sort of magical cure-all. There's obviously more complex mental health things going on that people contend with. But just in sort of like that general, like feeling like crap, eating, sleeping, that's a good way to directly affect your mental health without, trying to do mental healthy things directly.
Yeah.
And I would say one more piece of advice because we're on a roll and, you got to throw a little bit of contrarianism in everything. I would say that sometimes for some people, the worst thing you can do is mindfulness and meditation. My friend Misha Yurchenko writes a blog that he sometimes touches on this subject, but there's a lot of pressure in society to adopt the things that people say are healthy for you. And you really do have to take a minute and decide if it's something that actually helps you. In the case of me, for example, meditation isn't what I need. It's just not. I know it's not. That doesn't help me feel good. But if I really want to feel good, it's better for me to go for a walk. It's better for me to listen to music really deeply. It's better for me to maybe do some exercise. It's better for me to call a friend for a few minutes and like chat. When I hang up the phone, I feel more connected with myself and more in tune with my emotions. And if I sit still, I kind of can fall into a little bit of like a malaise that might take the whole day to get out of. And then people will be like, you're meditating wrong. Like, sure, I agree. But I'm just saying, like, sometimes the best advice that seems to be for everyone actually isn't really the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something I always encourage people on is like, you know yourself better than anybody else. So take any advice, any tips with a total grain of salt, because like just because everyone's saying, oh, meditating's the thing, that doesn't mean that it feels right in your body. And only you know what feels right for you. So, okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Last thing is plug yourself. Anything, where can we find you? Anything you're
Plug
working
myself.
on? Yeah.
Sure. So my music project is called Muted Circus, MUTED CIRCUS. It's kind of mopey songs. Half of them are instrumental, half of them are vocal. There's a lot in there. Give it a listen. Maybe just choose one song and listen deeply. I think that would be great. You can find it on all the places where people typically listen. And if you Google it, you can find it that way too. I think it's also at mutedcircus.com. Check it
All
out.
right. Yeah.
There's only one Muted Circus in the whole world, so I think they shouldn't have trouble finding it.
Yeah, easy to find. Cool. All right, Benny. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been awesome.
Thank you.
And I'll make sure to include all of those links in the show notes.